Did you hear that?
I did.
Okay, floor is yours. Thank you.
All right. My name is Jamie, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. My recovery date is July 20th, 2015. I have been set free from the chains of addiction from IV opiate use and meth. I was struggling with addiction probably since I was a child in one form or another. So my first addiction actually was to escape, and I would kind of like make up stories. My parents moved a lot. They were not in the military; it was some other circumstances. So I went to 12 different schools by the time that I got to high school. And so every time I would get to a new place, I would make up a new version of myself. And I would be like this new person because, um, if you're anything like me and other people who struggle with addiction, we have trouble kind of like feeling comfortable in our own skin and being able to like connect with people. So I feel like having that against me and then having to move all the time with a lot of trauma going on in my house, and my father was an alcoholic, and so there was like a lot of abuse and things like that. So just always moving to new places, not being able to have friends to like talk about what was going on, no like safe space. I really just tried to cover it, with making these kind of like new versions of myself. So, I would move to a new place and be like, well, they didn't really like me over there. So I'm going to be this version of Jamie now, and just make up this whole new person. Um, Also, one thing that I use addictively also was food. So I was either starving myself or I was overeating. Always had like very poor body image, self worth, self esteem, and that was really hard. I was like a chubby kid growing up too, so that that didn't help with the not feeling like I fit in anywhere. And so when I got to high school, I actually found this group of people that finally accepted me for who I was, and they were drug dealers. And so they loved me unconditionally, and we laughed together. And this is high school. We were just doing like high school stuff, right? Nothing crazy. I remember going to a party, and I remember when the like drugs really became like my solution. I went to this party. There was like all like the popular kids were there, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have this anxiety and I really want to fit in. I really want these people to like me. And all of a sudden, they were passing around, some stuff, just like pot or whatever, just like your regular. And I think we had this like weird colored wines. I'm dating my age now. um, so like I think they were like boons or something like that. And so I remember like doing that, and then like all of a sudden, like it was like something flipped in my brain. Like all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm funny and I'm charming and people like me and I'm not insecure. And I'm like, this is what I've been looking for my whole entire life. And that's kind of where I found that, changing the way that I felt with substances became my solution. And if it would have stayed at that little like fun weekend, funny movie kind of thing, like it would have been one thing. But for me, my drug of choice was more. So I went into all of the different avenues, had like a lot of different scenes, I guess. Went through like the rave scene. I was like the girl with the Jenko jeans and the glow sticks, and the Earth festivals and all that. And getting like all the way up to, the real kind of serious drugs. So I grew up with a faith. So I grew up a specific religion. I'm not going to say what it is, but it was a very like workspace religion. Um, So I always knew about God, but I didn't know about relationship with God. I thought if I do A, B, C, and D, I'm good to go. Um, Otherwise, I'm going to the pits of hell and fire. That was like really like all that I knew. Um, so I was a pretty good kid. I actually, graduated high school with honors. I even went to college and I worked two jobs and went to college, all while like maintaining this functional, addiction that I had. Um, until things started to get like real out of hand, and that probably was in 2006 was one. There was like a three like traumatic events that happened to me within like 3 weeks at a time. It was wild. I had gotten sexually assaulted, my father died, and then I got arrested. And so when my father died, I started using crack instead of like cocaine, and that took me to a whole new level. It brought me to places where I was prostituting myself. I had an ad on Craigslist, and that led me to getting arrested for prostitution and a huge prostitution sting in Polk County, Florida. And they put me on the news. They made an example out of me. It was one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever had. And you would have thought that I would have, changed my ways and turned around from there. But I tried, I wanted to. I made a geographical change. And, of course, within a couple months, ended up being in the same kind of spot with the same people in the same places, even in a whole nother state. It was like they were just like, it was like we were drawn to each other. I don't know. It was crazy. And then that led me to being in a crack house that got raided. That was really scary. That was the first time I went to like jail. I went to jail for 20 days and it was pretty scary. Got out, tried to do the right thing. And for a little while I did, but I was still kind of messing around with things. And I didn't do any of the internal work. There's a level of internal work we have to do to be able to heal. And so moving, forward, ended up starting like opiate pain pills, which I found to be the love of my life. There were these little blue pills, and you could, use them IV, and that was like the love of my life. I was like, as long as I have these little blue pills, I do not need anyone or anything. And I went to any length to get them. I was a person who we could say that I dated doctors. So I would go to doctors' offices during lunch, when they were closed, and I would trade sex for prescriptions. And so did the whole like doctor shopping thing, had like a whole ring of friends who did the doctor shopping thing. And so I guess luckily for me, I never got into, heroin because I would probably be dead. I just didn't have that. I just happened to be in a circle of, of people who did, pain pills from doctors, because nowadays, it's so scary with everything on the street. And so um, that led me to when I got pregnant with my daughter. And when I had her, I was addicted to pain pills. Um, I came clean to my OBGYN at about 7 months pregnant that because I had a prescription from her for some just mild pain pills, but not to the level of what I was taking. And they told me, okay, well, we'll just have your daughter, in the NICU for, a week or whatever. We'll just watch her, everything should be fine. And that was not what happened. When I had her, they took her from me right away. I was not allowed to be in the same room with her unsupervised. she had to be in the NICU for 6 weeks on phenobarbital and morphine to detox her off of the pain medication. It was the most like horrific time in my life. There was so much shame and guilt. At that time, we didn't have like recovery coaches and things like that in the hospitals like we do now. So there wasn't that support. So really it just pushed me further into, shame and guilt. But one thing that it did do is it took me to the first time that I decided to go into detox. So then it began a revolving door of, detox, short-term treatment. I would go in, um, I would get out, a week later, however long, and I would be like, okay, I'm cured. Now I can shoot pain pills like everybody else, right? And I couldn't understand that if I continued to put in, I was going to, become dependent again. And I couldn't understand that. Like people would tell me, like, I must have detoxed off pain pills like 100 times. Like so many times. And people would be like, you don't have to do this ever again. And I would be like, well, what are you talking about? Like, of course I'm going to do this again. Like, it just, I couldn't get it like past my brain that I could ever live my life without these things. Um, and so eventually I ended up getting arrested again, which is so interesting because I got arrested, went to the same jail I went to the first time for the same amount of days, exactly 20 days. And but this time, when I got busted, I had a schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It was a Tuesday night. It was just a little variety pack of everything, and the cops were like, what is this? And I'm just like, it's Tuesday, like, and so it was so interesting when I was in there. I was so tired. I was tired of myself. I was tired of like my own BS. I was tired of not being able to be like a mom, I was tired of like having to sleep with people, to sleep on their couch, like to put it bluntly. And, putting myself in all of these like very unsafe situations, not knowing when I was going to be able to shower or eat, because when you're in that kind of lifestyle, you're kind of all over the place. Um, Basically to, whoever has whatever you need, right? Like if you had drugs in my pocket, you were my boyfriend, basically. So it I was like a slave. I was a slave to drugs. Um, and so I knew I wanted to do something different, but I didn't know how. I went in front of the judge and he told me how, actually. He said, if you fail a drug test or get in trouble for the next 4 years, we're going to put you on a wonderful felony probation, and you are going to go to prison for the next 4 years. And I was just like, wow. Something clicked in my brain at that moment. And I thought to myself, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to pass a drug test or not get in trouble. And so when I got out, I wasn't even out 4 days and I was already using it, so I knew something had to change. Luckily, I had a friend call me. She was somebody that we actually used to sell pills together, but she was getting out of prison and she said, hey, getting out of prison, going into this sober living in Athens, Georgia, which is where University of Georgia is. So Athens, Georgia is basically like a huge campus for UGA. Either you work for UGA or you're in recovery, one of the two. You're a student, right? So that's basically UGA, Athens, Georgia, out here. So ended up somebody was kind enough to give me the $500 entrance fee, and I walked into this house. It was very strange to me. It was like a sober sorority. There was like 13 other girls in this house, and they basically told me that they would love me until I could learn to love myself. And that was probably one of the best days of my life, even though at the time I probably thought it was the worst day. But it was so cool because I had a room and it had a bed and it was mine and it was safe. I had a closet like that I could use like half of it, and I had a dresser, that I could put my stuff in. There was a bathroom and a shower that I could use anytime. There was a kitchen full of food. So I didn't have to worry about when I was going to eat next, and there was other people around me, right? Because when you're living this kind of life of being an addiction, even the people that you're around, you might say that they're your friends, but are they really? You know what I mean? Like, do they really care about you? When you fall asleep and they steal your stuff, you know? So this was like actually like people that, they were trying to do the same thing I was, right? Except they had been there longer than me and they had a little bit of wisdom. And so they shared with me, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to meetings. I was a 12-step baby, so I've worked the steps in all forms. Um, they said, you have to get a job and you can't wear that. So they taught me how to dress, like a lady. And taught me how to like carry myself, like they said, you don't have to sleep with that guy for a ride to work. We'll give you a ride. And I was like, oh, really? Like it was just mind blowing to me. Like, oh my goodness, like you really want to help me? Like what, and you don't want anything out of it? Like this is crazy to me. And that was just like the true like spirit of like people in recovery that I found. And, I'd been through a lot of trauma, as you can imagine, with the things that I was involved with, being an ex-sex worker. So, learning how to like trust people and feel safe and be like comfortable. It was something that took some time. I was I was really, really lucky when I got to my sober living. There was a counselor who had just started and he had just come from a faith-based rehab, and he basically like kind of like adopted me into his family, because my family didn't want anything to do with me after what happened with my daughter. So he basically adopted me into his family, and I went into a 4.5 year discipleship where I got to really learn about relationship with God, which was very different than what I had known growing up. And there were a lot of barriers that I had to break through because in my beliefs, Jesus is a man, and I had a lot of trauma from men. So it was something that was really hard, but it was really cool because it kind of it perfectly aligned with my steps, like as I was going through them. Like when I got to like my third step where, you want to like turn over like your will and your life, your thoughts and your actions, you know what I mean? Like totally like surrender to God, was the time that I was getting baptized. So it was just like it was perfect. Then I was doing like my fourth step. And I remember that was really hard for me because I mean, it was like I had like a 5-star notebook, okay? And for those of you who don't know about a 4-step, it's like an inventory, and you have to do like a resentment, and then you have to do a sex inventory and a fear inventory. That's how my sponsor did it. So I had a 5-star notebook, and 3/4 of it was a sex inventory. You know what I mean? And she tells me to take it home, take it home and meditate on it and ask God what He wants me to see in it. And I'm like, I don't want you to look at this, God. Like, I think I'm going to be in trouble. And it was so cool because it was at that time that God really began to reveal Himself to me, which was a pivotal part of my recovery because it dismantled all of these false beliefs that I had, that I was unworthy and insignificant and unlovable. And so I remember really just saying like, okay, God, if you truly want me to my full surrender, I'm going to need to know how you feel about me, because what I learned growing up in, you know, my religion that I grew up in, it's that you don't like me very much because of these things that I've done, and I'm going to be in really big trouble soon. And so the next day, I remember going to my mom's house, and my daughter was there, and she was probably about 5 years old, and she was scribbling like with a broken crayon. She had food all over her face. Her hair was a mess, and I looked at her like, this is the most amazing creature I have ever seen in my life. Like, just this adoration, like beaming out of me for her, you know? And God spoke to me in that moment, and He said, that's how I look at you. And that just like changed my life forever. It changed my life forever. And then I began to, let the walls down, and be able to trust God with things, So that was really pivotal for me. Trusting something that you can't see is really hard. It's really hard, especially if you can't hear, can't see. So that's, true faith. But recovery has afforded me so many things. At 89 days sober, I got to go to one of the detoxes that I had been at, and I got to tell my story, and seeing like the light come on in people's eyes, and like them being like, you have 89 days sober, and I'd be like, yeah, and I was right over there on the other side of the table too, and I had those grippy socks on and everything, and today I get to walk out of here, you know what I mean? And it was like I could see like they had hope, and I was like, oh my goodness, like there is a purpose in this pain that I went through. There is like a message in all of the mess that I've been through. And so I began speaking out about my recovery, a lot of different places. I began a career at the same time as well as a massage therapist, which it would normally be like really, really hard for someone who had like the kind of charges that I had, but prayer, perseverance, and just continuing to do the next right thing over a period of time, I was able to get my license from the state and start my own business. Started a massage therapy business. I was still in sober living. I stayed in sober living for 3.5 years because luckily for us, the way that it was is it on a big campus, right? So we went from like a house with 13 girls to a house with 4 girls to an apartment with 2 girls till I finally got my own apartment. So, and I was very involved, and I loved it there. I loved serving. I loved working with the women, and it was safe. Biggest thing for me. So, you know, as we kind of like went on in my journey, I created a trauma informed massage therapy protocol for women coming out of human trafficking and prostitution. So I teach that at a school, a massage therapy school, and we implement it in a local nonprofit here. So that's amazing. Divas Who Win Freedom Center. I am a recovery coach certified through the state of Georgia. I'm a certified addiction recovery empowerment specialist. I am a certified peer specialist for addictive disease. You can find all of my links at Jamie Tall anywhere, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I also work for Sober Network, which has a huge network of like recovery coaching programs. And we also sell this amazing sober water that you can get from soberlife.com. And so this is Drown the Stigma. I say drown the stigma, rep your recovery. I went to go do a commercial for them, and I had a Sober Life shirt on, and I had the water, and I was in the tram at the airport because they flew me out to Florida, and they said, this guy in the tram was like, he saw my shirt and he goes, hey, and he shows me a white chip, just picked this up yesterday. And I was just like, what? Like, that's so cool. You know what I mean? Like, just, I'm all about being out loud about recovery, stomping out stigma, normalizing sobriety, right? Even if you're not like a, rock bottom alcoholic, like some of us were, you know what I mean? Like, hangovers just don't feel good, and it's not good for you. So we want to, live our best life. and have, you know, the most possibilities, and it's better to do that with a clear head and with sober friends and a recovery community to back you. So today I am a mom, and I get to take care of a 20-year-old and a 14-year-old. So that's amazing. And I have two businesses, and I just get to speak out about recovery in so many different ways. And I have an amazing relationship with God today. And yeah, so I just want to say that recovery is possible no matter what you have been through, especially moms who have, lost their children. Don't stay in that shame and guilt, because you know what I mean. My son finally came back to live with me when he was like 19 years old. So it's like it's never too late. You'll always be a mom. They will always need you. I just want to say that for the ladies because I hear that so much. Yeah, and recovery is possible.